So following the presentation on the integrated modeling work in Turkey, I'll now introduce the CLEWs model being developed for South Africa as part of my master's research. My name is Ashley Dingwall. I'm a master's student with the Energy Systems Research Group at the University of Cape Town. So the aim of this work is to develop an integrated CLEWs model that captures the interdependencies between energy, land, and water systems in South Africa, as well as to explore how an integrated approach can provide additional insights that may be missed when these sectors are modeled in isolation. So starting at the very beginning with why integrated modeling matters. So many policy decisions around climate and energy are highly interdependent, meaning that decisions and interventions in one sector can have positive or negative impacts for the other sectors. Here, we refer to positive impacts as synergies and negative impacts as trade-offs. So a simple example of this would be the conversion of agricultural land for renewable energy sources, such as wind or solar farms, which creates a negative impact or trade-off on food production while maintaining a direct positive impact on climate change through the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of a cleaner energy mix. Importantly, these integrated modeling approaches are especially valuable for policymakers who require consistent evidence across these sectors to ensure policy coherence. Turning now to the CLEWs framework, which stands for Climate, Land, Energy, and Water Systems, but abbreviated CLEWs. So the CLEWs framework was developed by the International Atomic Energy Agency in 2009 as a tool for integrated assessment of resource systems. One important thing to note, and that people often get confused by, is that CLEWs is a framework. It's not a modeling tool in itself. So it provides a way of thinking about and structuring the interactions between climate, land, energy, and water systems, but it still needs to be implemented within a modeling tool, such as times or osmosis, in order to generate quantitative results. So as I mentioned, the CLEWs framework was developed by the International Atomic Energy Agency in recognition of the fact that energy, land, and water systems are inherently interconnected, such that developments or interventions in one sector can create synergies or trade-offs in the other sectors. And so treating them independently can overlook these synergies and trade-offs, which is why an integrated approach is necessary. So this diagram shows the interdependence between climate, land, energy, and water systems. So water influences both energy and food production. Energy is required for thermal power plant cooling in the energy sector, and it's also required for food production in the agriculture sector. Energy is required for water supply, so for moving and treating water, and it's also required for food production in the agriculture sector. So for example, in the agriculture sector, we have irrigation technologies, which rely on electricity to move water. Land use decisions affect both water availability and energy infrastructure, or the siting thereof. And climate both influences and is influenced by all three systems. So CLEWs helps us to model these interactions so that government policies are aligned and resilient under climate change. Shifting now to the South Africa CLEWs model. So the model was developed at national scale over the time period 2020 to 2055, with 2020 to 2024 serving as the historical or calibration years, and 2025 to 2055 serving as the projected years. As mentioned, the model is developed to explore cross-sectoral interactions between energy, land, and water system sectors. Structurally, the model includes energy, so both the supply and demand side, land or different land uses, different land covers. So in the model, I currently have grassland, forest land, built-up area or artificial surfaces, water bodies, and cropland. Importantly, these land uses are aligned to the land use representations within the IPCC framework. The livestock sector is also modeled, so that includes sheep, goat, and cattle. Waste sector, consisting of both liquid and solid waste, and water, which is included as an input into the above sectors. Importantly, and what really makes it a CLEWs model, is that interlinkages between these sectors are explicitly modeled. And in a few slides' time, I will speak to what exactly these interactions are that are being modeled. Another important thing to note is that traditionally CLEWs has been energy, land, and water, and emissions attached to those sectors. But there's been a recent shift to include livestock and waste as key emissions-intensive sectors, which now produces the CLEWs++ framework, or advanced CLEWs framework. Again, just to reiterate, CLEWs is not a modeling tool in itself, but rather it's a framework that can be applied using various different modeling tools, such as times, message, osmosis. For the purpose of this research, osmosis was chosen as the modeling tool of choice. For a bit of background on osmosis, it is a least cost optimization tool used to design and analyze long-term energy pathways. It's open source and freely available, which is important, particularly important to a resource-constrained government. Most importantly, for my purpose, it's compatible with the CLEWs application, and it's also widely used by governments for national planning processes, as we've seen in the case of Turkey. There's also a new graphical interface, referred to as the modeling user interface for osmosis, which is also the interface that I use to implement my model. So this new interface was developed to make model building more structured and accessible. It's also widely been used in capacity building events, such as, for example, the energy modeling platforms hosted by Climate Compatible Growth. There's also a paper currently under review with myself and another senior researcher at Imperial College, Dr. Lee Martindale, where we explore the pedagogical benefits of the interface. And at the end of the presentation, I'll show you some insights that we got from that research as well. So a couple slides back, I spoke briefly to the sectors that are represented in the model. So this slide dives a little deeper into what exactly that actually covers. So starting with the energy sector, so we have the supply side and the demand side. On the supply side, this includes electricity and the liquid fuel sector. The power sector is disaggregated into generation, transmission, and distribution, with power generation containing the most detail. So the liquid fuel sector at the moment is represented quite simply within the model. On the demand side, this includes South Africa's 5 demand sectors. So the residential sector, commercial sector, transport, agriculture, and industry sectors. On land, this includes, as I've mentioned previously, cropland, which is further disaggregated into rain-fed and irrigated crops, built-up area of forest land, water bodies, and an other category, which consists of wetland, shrubland, sparse vegetation, and bare area. Livestock, I won't go into this in too much detail, but the livestock sector was modeled in osmosis using the mode of operation feature. And really all this does, it just enables me to model livestock practices into two different livestock practices. So the first being current livestock practices, and the second being climate-friendly livestock practices. And again, for both of these, this includes sheep, cattle, and goats. The waste sector, including which consists of both solid and liquid waste sectors, and water, which is a key input into the above sectors. So, for example, water is required as an input in the energy sector for cooling thermal power plants, and is required in the agriculture sector for crops production. And lastly, emissions are attached to the above sectors. So this slide is really where the CLEWs part of the research comes alive, the sectoral interlinkages that tie the sectors together. So starting with the water-energy nexus, water is needed for cooling thermal power plants. So in South Africa, this includes coal power plants, nuclear, and natural gas. So water was explicitly modeled into these power plants as an input. The energy-water nexus, so energy in the form of electricity is needed for pumping and treating water. Energy, also electricity, is needed for irrigation technologies in the agriculture sector. Energy, on the energy and land nexus, energy, diesel, is needed for preparing and harvesting crops. So diesel is needed for the machinery. Then on the water-land nexus, water is needed in the agriculture sector for crops production. And then moving on to the advanced CLEWs sectors, the livestock land nexus, so land is required, specifically grassland is required for maintaining livestock. So again, grassland is explicitly modeled as an input into the livestock sector. And lastly, on the waste energy nexus, there's potential for landfill gas from the waste sector to generate electricity in the energy sector. So landfill gas is an output of the waste sector, and then it feeds back into the energy sector as an input for electricity generation. So key challenges in developing the model are as follows. So starting with data availability and access, which was mentioned in the just transition framework, the just transition segment a little earlier. So for the energy sector, data availability I found is generally quite strong, particularly because energy systems models have been developed for many years, including the South African Times model hosted and maintained by the Energy Systems Research Group at UCT. However, access can sometimes depend on institutional arrangements. In my case, I was able to use data from the SATA model, which provided a strong foundation for the energy component of the model. For other sectors such as land and water, a lot of information that are used as input into the model relied on national reports, as well as government and international data sets. So, for example, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which I used as input data in the crops production sector. However, integrating these data sets into a modeling framework can be more challenging, as it may not always be at the level of detail that is required, and assumptions often differ across data sets. Also, when modeling technologies in more detail, for example, different crop types with irrigated, rain-fed, or high input, low input production systems, things like cost data becomes less readily available. So in these cases, it can be necessary to rely on proxy data or literature values from other country contexts, or assumptions to represent these technologies within the model. Another important challenge relates to institutional modeling capacity. So developing and maintaining integrated models requires technical skills, specialized technical skills, and collaboration across sectors. While I was fortunate enough to have strong supervision and support during this research, building broader modeling capacity across institutions remains an important consideration for scaling these type of approaches. This slide just highlights the nexus interactions modeled, or potential insights that we could get from a South African CLEWs model. Linking back to the research paper on the new osmosis interface that I mentioned a few slides earlier, as part of that research, I ran some simple scenarios to test how the interface supports nexus thinking learning. And that included a precipitation scenario where the country experiences drier conditions, so it receives less rainfall. And essentially, an assumption I made in that scenario is that the amount of water needed for irrigation per unit of land would increase by the same amount that precipitation decreases by. So, for example, if precipitation decreases by 10%, the amount of water needed for irrigation would also increase by 10% to compensate for drier conditions. And so this created stress on the energy and land sectors, which both rely on the water system. And the result from this was that there was an earlier coal phase out due to an increased demand for water for irrigation in the agriculture sector. And if you didn't take away anything else from this presentation, here are some key reflections. Integrated modeling supports coherent policy analysis. National models complement global IAMs. And most importantly, building modeling capacity is key for evidence-based planning. Great. Thanks, everyone. That's it from me for the presentation.
Do we have any questions for Ashley? Okay, can we also bring the speaker that is online into the room as well in case there are cross-cutting questions? Okay, there's one question here. So there's a question here by you, William. The lady next to Dr. Mantlana, and then Dr. Mantlana, Mr. Steve, Nichols, and Tanya.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. Another great presentation. So I think in your presentation, you made a lot of emphasis on how interconnected the different sectors are. And as we heard in previous presentations, when you have policy reform, often there are winners and there are losers. How do you account for the interconnectivity between these sectors and policy reform within the sectors in terms of how they positively or negatively affect each participant?
Thanks, William. Let's take the questions from this side. And then you can respond after those two questions.
My name is Rezaz. I'm from UCT. Thank you very much for the insightful presentations. My question is about the South African model. So I'm just curious if the examples, like the linkages you mentioned between the different sectors, are these just an examples or are these all the linkages? Because I was just curious about the energy-water nexus, where it's only showing the connection between water consumption for thermal power plants cooling, while there's nothing on renewable energy, like, for example, concentrated solar power that has a really high water consumption for the plant operation and cleaning of the mirrors and this kind of things. Thank you.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you for the presentation. I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
It's dark here and I'm black. Firstly, the presentation is very good. The research is well done. Congratulations about that. What I would like to listen to you about is this CLEWs model. What is the weakness? What are the weaknesses of that framework from your experience? The reason I'm saying that is because for those of us who work a lot on the nexus space, when we talk about the nexus interactions, we often present them as if they are balanced. They contribute to the analysis equally, whereas often analysis of nexus tends to, the weightings, you sometimes find that it's stronger on one component and weaker on the other. So I'm not familiar with the CLEWs, so I would like to listen to you, Uguti, what are its weaknesses? I heard the strengths that you mentioned. Thank you.
Well, I'll start with yours. I haven't gotten that far into the research just yet, but that was a very interesting point and something that I'll consider a little further as I get a bit deeper into it. That didn't answer your question, but yes, the nexus, the interlinkages are current. Those are the ones currently being modeled. At this point, yes, water is only an input into thermal power plants for cooling, and not renewable energy. But those are the initial interlinkages. So I might add further, add more interlinkages as I go along. So those are the ones that I identified initially. Was there a second part to your question? No. Okay. Okay. So I think for the weaknesses of CLEWs, it is a technical model, and so it does miss out on the things that I think we really care about, which is the socioeconomic things. So that's, I guess, the one. But then again, any model is built fit for purpose, and maybe the purpose for CLEWs is technical insights, you know. But things that, so just to add on to that, so I think that would maybe be a weakness of CLEWs. It doesn't capture that socioeconomic stuff. But within CLEWs, or within this new osmosis interface, you can model co-benefits. I haven't done it myself, but I know that in previous, or in other CLEWs studies, they've modeled co-benefits of things like air quality and so forth. I don't know what that looks like, but I know that it's possible. That was the one. And then you mentioned about how, so the second part of your question related to how some sectors might have like a, yeah, okay. So CLEWs, it obviously represents energy, land, water, and climate, right? But really, if we're looking at a CLEWs model, at least in South Africa's case, because energy is the largest emissions intensive sector, it's energy first, and then how those other things link to energy. So let's say that there's a bigger focus on energy, and then it's land, and then water, right? So I guess with me saying that, I guess most of the insights that we'd get, if that is the approach that is being taken, which is generally the case, you'd probably get stronger insights from energy and also the interlinkages thereof, and maybe a bit weaker between like land and water and so forth. But it also depends how you choose to model it. If you want more detail there, you'll just add more detail so you can get more insights. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. We're sharing the podium, which is, it's okay. Steve, you're next, and then Tanya. Is your mic working?
Yeah. So there is a question online from Mark, so I don't know if we can feed that in. But my question is, you very casually dropped a bomb on us there, saying that water is a constraint on coal, and that once you run the integrated model, that coal closes earlier. Yeah. I'd be keen to hear a bit more about that, and how much earlier. But let's see if we can get Mark online.
Okay.
Mark, try speaking. I think you're muted.
Hi, sorry about that, and thank you so much for the opportunity to ask the question. So my questions are for Ashley and Abdurrahim. The first one is maybe more to Ashley, and this is the model that you've developed. Is it going to be made publicly available? And then will the data be set up so that you said that you're using international data sources, which will not necessarily reflect actual data in South Africa, but that represents an opportunity for stakeholders to engage and improve that data. So an open question is are there plans for stakeholder engagement, both to understand the level of the data that's available now, how it can be improved, and maybe also to understand the limitations of the model as it is right now? Then the other question is to Abdurrahim, and just to say it's a privilege to work together with the Turkish team, and for those who don't know the amount of effort that they put together to develop a tool in less than a year, run scenarios to develop climate commitments, and then win the position of running the next COP this year was immense. It was an enormous amount of work. That said, you said that there are a number of things that you might want to add to the model going forward. CLEWs is a model generator, so it allows you to put as much detail as you want. But what are the things that you think would be most important to add? Thank you.
You can respond. We'll take Tanya's question after this.
I'll start with Mark's question, and then I'll get back to Steve's. Just for context, Mark is my supervisor, so he's probably reminding me that I do have to make this open source. So the answer to that is yes for both. That will be the data will be made available online, and the limit. I think Mark also asked about the limitations on relying on international data sets. Obviously, naturally, you want to rely on local data sets. But sometimes when that is not available, you have to rely on international. So I guess the way that the model is at this stage is that once national data, local data becomes available, you can always swap that out. And having data that's open source makes that easier as well. So yes, for both of those. And then on Steve's question, those were preliminary, so they're still under review. How much sooner? It wasn't a ridiculous amount sooner, but there was a difference in when coal gets decommissioned, particularly, if I remember correctly, around 2039. But yes, those are still preliminary. But hopefully, once that is reviewed, we'll have a paper on that, so then you can have a closer look into that and what the underlying assumptions are and how I got to that. But yes.
Abdurrahim, can you please, there was a question for you by Mark. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Also, I would like to thank the CCG team. Actually, it is our privilege to work with the CCG team. Without CCG team, we couldn't do this enhancement. We couldn't enhance our modeling capacity, and we submitted our NDC on time. Actually, I would like to, first of all, I would like to confess something. Before CCG team, we almost after during the 2 years, we shared our concept a lot of national and international institutions to develop to enhancing our modeling capacity within the DOCC. Actually, I would like to also confess 2 times I applied the national budget and they refused me. Also, I would like to confess. So, for some international organization, they agree with my concept, but they said to me that I am very ambitious. Some of them, they said that they have some program, I need to apply this program, but the program doesn't fit all my concept. So first of all, I would like to thank you, CCG, flexibility and understanding our needs and answering our requests based on our needs. So this was very good collaboration. So for the modeling development, actually, now our model covers the some extent energy in the land, but the climate nexus is missing. So we would like to expand our modeling to integrate some climate parameters. Maybe we can start with the water, then maybe other climate parameters. In our DOC Directorate Climate, we have another department, Department of Adaptation. They now running a climate model, so we would like to integrate our CLEWs, our CLEWs framework with the outputs of this climate model, because as you know, if the drought increases, the hydropower capacity will decreases. There are also maybe the water won't be enough to agriculture sector, so we would like to see this interaction. So this is our vision, to integrate the model with our climate model. Maybe in a long-term vision, also integrate with a CG model to see the effect of the emission mitigation emission mitigation on the overall economy. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We've got one more hand, Tanya. Oh, there's another one on this table. Yeah, so it's two more. So it's Tanya, it's you, and then we're going to come back to this table.
Okay, I'm Tanya Lijn-Visser, also from UCT, but from the Center for Transport Studies. Thankfully, Mark asked my first question about open source, so that's done. Then, just two quick ones. The one is, where is mining included, or is it included in the framework and in your model? And then second is, speaking to this question of water affecting the power generation, how are those priorities assigned? So more in the model, how would it prioritize water for agriculture over energy?
Okay, on this table.
Hello? Yeah, listening to you, I think I can only learn of one scenario apart from the business of as usual, where you said you have less precipitation, and your result was that the demand for water for agriculture is proportional to the less precipitation that you have. So looking at CLEWs like it's a nexus between climate, land, energy. So I want to know, did you look at any linkages with that less precipitation to energy or to climate and things like that?
Yeah.
Did you understand my question?
I
Not
think
really.
so.
Eh? The less precipitation.
Yeah.
What was the effect on energy aspects and climate aspects,
Yeah.
etc.?
Okay. I think I got it. Sorry, could you?
So just where does mining feature?
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Was it just mining, or was there another?
The other one was, how does the model prioritize water, for example, over for one purpose over another? Well,
Okay,
how does that weighting or
Yeah.
priority system work?
Okay, so mining is under industry. So for industry, you can choose to have just broad industry. So that is just electricity for industry or so forth, or you can disaggregate industry into the subsectors. So mining would be one of the subsectors. So that is what I'm doing in my model at the moment. So mining is disaggregated and it's represented on its own, like under industry, essentially.
But not a land use?
Not the land use, no. Then on the demands, so between energy and land, you obviously, there's two sets of demands, right? The first demand is you need to meet electricity, your electricity demand, right? And then in the land the crop sector, you also need to meet the demand for crops. So in South Africa, it's like 6 crops: maize, sugarcane, 6 major crops, and then like another group, that's the other stuff. So essentially, the first objective of the model is to meet those demands, right? Crops, it's not as flexible. Like if you need to have X amount of maize, you need to have X amount of maize. So that's inputted into the model. And then electricity generation, there's also a demand that needs to be met, but the way in which you meet that can change. You can rely on coal, you can rely on renewable. And I think this kind of links back to yours, because water is required for thermal power plant cooling. That water water is not necessarily required in that case, because you can swap out to renewable, but then it goes back to your question. But water is definitely needed for crops. So without water, sufficient amount of water going into crops, the model essentially won't run. So what it does, it says, okay, right, then let's not use as much coal, let's phase that out and pick up solar, which is what it did. It picked up utility scale solar and natural gas, so natural gas requires water, but it requires less water than coal. So essentially when coal phased out quicker, utility scale solar picked up, as well as natural gas to kind of like support the solar. And then that other water from coal, I guess, was like freed up and it could meet the demand in the crop sector. I don't know if that answers your question. Okay.
That's okay.